My name is Hannah Brooks. I'm 27 years old, and if someone had told me a month ago that I would bury my husband before my 20th birthday, I would have laughed in disbelief. Ethan wasn't just my husband. He was my best friend, my safe place, and the only person who ever made me believe that family wasn't defined by blood, it was defined by love. The day of his funeral felt unreal. I stood beside his casket wearing the same black dress I'd bought for a wedding anniversary dinner we never got to have. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as people hugged me, whispered how sorry they were, and promised to pray for me. Their words floated around me like distant echoes. None of them could reach the numbness inside me. Ethan had died in a car accident just 5 days earlier while driving home from a business meeting. One careless driver crossed the center line, and in a matter of seconds, my entire future disappeared. We had only been married for 3 years. 3 years wasn't enough. After everyone left the cemetery, I stayed behind alone. I rested my hand on the polished wood of his coffin before it was lowered into the ground. I don't know how to do this without you, I whispered through tears. You promised we'd grow old together. The wind carried away my words, leaving only silence. Eventually, I climbed into my car and drove toward the only place I thought I still belonged. My parents' house. When Ethan and I got married, we had lived in a small apartment downtown. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. After his death, walking into that apartment felt impossible. Every corner reminded me of him, his favorite coffee mug, his jacket hanging behind the bedroom door, the half-finished puzzle on our dining table. I needed somewhere familiar. Or at least I thought I did. My parents, Richard and Linda Brooks, had always favored my younger sister, Chloe. She was 24, charming, dramatic, and somehow always the center of attention. Growing up, I learned that if Chloe wanted something, she usually got it. When I earned scholarships, my parents celebrated Chloe's participation trophies. When I graduated college with honors, they skipped my ceremony because Chloe wanted to go shopping. When Ethan proposed, my mother actually asked if he had any single friends for Chloe. I should have seen the signs years ago. Still, grief has a strange way of making you hope people will finally become kinder. I was wrong. When I parked outside their house, I sat in the driveway for almost 2 minutes, trying to gather enough strength to walk inside. The front door opened before I reached it. Hannah, my mother said, giving me a brief hug that lasted barely 2 seconds. Come in. Her voice wasn't cold. It was simply empty. Inside, my father sat in his favorite recliner watching television with the volume turned low. He glanced at me. Funeral over? I nodded quietly. Yeah, I'm sorry, he muttered before turning his eyes back to the screen. That was it. No hug. No conversation. Nothing. Chloe walked downstairs wearing expensive clothes I knew she couldn't afford. She wrapped her arms around me dramatically. Oh my God, Hannah. I can't even imagine what you're going through. For a brief moment, I believed she meant it. Then she whispered into my ear. So, are you inheriting anything? I froze. I slowly stepped away from her. What? She blinked innocently. I mean, Ethan owned his business, right? I'm just asking. I stared at her, unable to believe what I'd heard. My husband had been buried less than 3 hours ago. 3 hours. And she was already asking about money. I don't know, I answered quietly. I haven't even looked at his paperwork. She shrugged as if the timing wasn't inappropriate at all. Well, eventually you'll have to. My mother cleared her throat. Chloe's right. I looked at her in disbelief. What? Sweetheart, she said calmly, you're young. Life moves on. If Ethan left assets, you'll need to make practical decisions. Practical. That word hit me harder than any slap ever could. I wanted someone to ask whether I'd eaten, whether I'd slept, whether I was surviving. Instead, they wanted to know about money. That evening we ate dinner together. If you could call it dinner. Nobody mentioned Ethan. Not once. Instead, Chloe spent 20 minutes talking about a beach vacation she wanted to take with her boyfriend. Dad complained about gas prices. Mom criticized my black dress, saying it made me look pale. I barely touched my food. Around 9 o'clock, I excused myself and went upstairs to my old bedroom. Nothing had changed. The faded blue walls. The bookshelf. Even the tiny crack near the window was still there. I sat on the bed and finally allowed myself to cry. Not because Ethan was gone. I'd already cried until there were no tears left. I cried because I realized I had never truly had a family. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Ethan's attorney. Mrs. Brooks. Yes. My name is Daniel Carter. I handled your husband's estate planning. I'd like you to come by my office this afternoon. My heart tightened. Is something wrong? Nothing is wrong. There are simply several documents your husband specifically instructed us to discuss with you in person. After hanging up, I went downstairs. My mother was making coffee. Who is that? Ethan's lawyer. Immediately, all three heads turned toward me. What did he want? Chloe asked. He wants me to come to his office. My father muted the television. Sounds important. I guess. Chloe leaned against the kitchen counter. Do you think Ethan left you the company? I don't know. Maybe the apartment? I said I don't know. She exchanged a quick glance with my parents. It lasted less than a second. But I noticed it. Something about that look made my stomach twist. When I arrived at the attorney's office later that afternoon, Daniel Carter greeted me warmly. I'm sorry for your loss, Hannah. Thank you. He handed me a box of tissues before opening a thick file. Ethan updated his estate 6 months ago. I frowned. He never told me. He wanted it to be a surprise. Daniel smiled sadly. He said you always worried about the future. He wanted to make sure you'd never have to worry again. He slid several documents across the desk. I looked down. At first, the words didn't make sense. Then my eyes landed on a sentence that made my breathing stop. Owner transfer. 3 residential apartment buildings. I looked up. I don't understand. Daniel nodded gently. Your husband quietly invested in real estate over the past several years. He owned 3 fully paid apartment buildings. And according to his will, they now belong entirely to you. I stared at him, completely speechless. 3 apartment buildings. Not 1 apartment. 3 entire buildings. Daniel smiled softly. Ethan wanted you to have a life where no one could ever control you through money again. Before I could even process those words, my phone began vibrating nonstop. 1 call. Then another. Then another. Mom. Dad. Chloe. Again. And again. Somehow. They already knew. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Mom. Dad. Chloe. Over and over again. I stared at the screen before looking back at Daniel Carter. I haven't told anyone. He frowned. Neither have I. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. There was only one explanation. Someone inside the office had recognized my name and called someone they knew, or someone had seen me arrive. However it happened, the news had reached my family faster than I ever could have imagined. Daniel cleared his throat. Hannah, before you leave, Ethan left one more letter. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Ethan's familiar handwriting. My fingers trembled as I opened it. My beautiful Hannah. If you're reading this, then I'm no longer beside you, and for that, I'm truly sorry. I know your heart. You'll probably run back to your parents because you still hope they'll love you the way you deserve. I wish they would. But if they show you who they really are, believe them. The apartments aren't just an investment. They're your freedom. Never let anyone guilt you into giving away what we built together. I worked for years to make sure you'd never depend on people who only value you when you have something they want. Promise me one thing. Choose yourself. Love, Ethan. By the time I finished reading, tears blurred every word on the page. Even after his death, he had still protected me. I thanked Daniel, placed the letter safely inside my purse, and drove back to my parents' house. The moment I pulled into the driveway, the front door flew open. All 3 of them were waiting. Not because they were worried. Because they were excited. Hannah, Mom said with an unusually bright smile. Come inside. We made your favorite dinner. I almost laughed. In 27 years, my favorite dinner had only appeared when they wanted something. As soon as I stepped inside, Chloe hugged me. We're so proud of you. Proud of me? For inheriting my husband's final gift? Dad pulled out a chair. Sit down. The food was already on the table. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, homemade pie. It looked like Thanksgiving. For several minutes, they acted sweeter than they ever had in my entire life. Then Dad cleared his throat. So, there are 3 apartment buildings? Straight to the point. I nodded slowly. Yes. Mom smiled. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Chloe reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Ethan would want all of us to benefit from his kindness. I slowly pulled my hand away. What do you mean? She smiled as though the answer was obvious. Well, 1 building for you. 1 for Mom and Dad. And 1 for me. Silence filled the room. I honestly thought she was joking. Then I looked around the table. Nobody laughed. They were serious. I stared at my parents. You actually think Ethan left those buildings for all of us? Mom sighed dramatically. Family shares. Dad nodded. Besides, maintaining 3 buildings alone will be stressful. We can help. Help. That wasn't help. That was ownership. I appreciate the offer, I said calmly. But Ethan left them to me. Chloe rolled her eyes. Don't be selfish. Selfish. The word almost made me smile. I buried my husband yesterday. And today you're dividing up his property. She crossed her arms. You're acting emotional. Dad leaned forward. Listen carefully. We're your family. Those apartments should stay in the family. They're staying in the family. They belong to me. His face hardened. No. They belong to all of us. For the first time in my life. I didn't lower my eyes. I looked directly at him. No, Dad. They don't. The room became painfully quiet. Mom suddenly changed tactics. She started crying. Real tears. Or at least convincing ones. We sacrificed everything raising you. After all we've done. You won't even help us? I almost believed her. Then memories flooded back. The birthdays they forgot. The graduation they skipped. The holidays where Chloe received expensive gifts while I got discount store candles. The nights Ethan secretly paid my student loan because my parents refused to help after promising they would. No, they hadn't sacrificed for me. Ethan had. I stood up. I'm leaving. Dad slammed his hand on the table. If you walk out that door with those apartments, don't bother coming back. I looked at him for several seconds. Then I answered quietly. I've spent my whole life trying to earn this family's love. I'm finally tired. I walked out without looking back. The next morning my phone exploded with messages. Some came from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Your parents say you're abandoning them. Money changes people. You should share. Apparently my family had started telling everyone that greed had made me cruel. What they didn't mention was that they had demanded millions of dollars less than 24 hours after Ethan's funeral. Instead of arguing, I stayed silent. 2 weeks later, my parents filed a lawsuit. They claimed Ethan had verbally promised 1 apartment to Chloe before his death. It was ridiculous. There wasn't a single document supporting their story. Daniel smiled the moment he read the filing. They're desperate. We're going to win. 3 months later, the case finally reached court. The judge reviewed every document, every financial record, every signed page of Ethan's estate plan. Then my parents testified. Their story changed 3 different times. Chloe even claimed she had helped manage Ethan's properties. She had never visited a single one. Finally, Daniel stood and presented Ethan's handwritten letter, not as evidence of ownership, but to show his intentions. The courtroom fell silent as the judge read the words. Never let anyone guilt you into giving away what we built together. My mother lowered her eyes. Dad clenched his jaw. The judge dismissed every one of their claims. Then he looked directly at them. This court cannot rewrite a legally executed will simply because someone dislikes the outcome. Case dismissed. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us. One asked if I had anything to say. I looked toward my parents. For the first time. They looked small. Not powerful. Not intimidating. Just people whose greed had cost them everything. I faced the cameras. My husband spent years building a future for us. I honored his wishes. That's all. Then I walked away. 6 months later, life looked completely different. The apartment buildings generated enough income that I never had to worry about bills again. I hired professional managers. I returned to school and completed the counseling degree I had abandoned years earlier. Eventually, I started a small scholarship fund in Ethan's name for students who had lost a spouse or parent unexpectedly. Helping people healed something inside me. One afternoon, I received another letter. It was from Chloe. She apologized. She admitted she had spent her entire life believing our parents' behavior was normal. She asked if we could meet. I thought about it for several days. Then I wrote back, "I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. I hope you build a better life than the one we were taught. Please don't contact me again." It wasn't revenge. It was peace. A year after Ethan's funeral, I visited his grave carrying fresh white lilies. I sat beside the headstone as the evening sun warmed the grass. "You were right," I whispered. I finally chose myself. For the first time since losing him. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I wasn't searching for my family's approval. I was simply grateful. Grateful for the love Ethan had given me. Grateful for the courage he left behind. And grateful that the greatest inheritance he ever gave me wasn't 3 apartment buildings. It was the strength to walk away from the people who never truly loved me and the freedom to build a life surrounded by people who finally would.